Welcome, Rabbi Meir Goldberg. It's great to see you. Really doing, as they say, doing the work of the Lord at Meor, Rutgers, working in the field of Kiruv. It's a pleasure to see you. We got in touch because I wrote an article speaking basically about the death of the Kiruv movement, definitely the way it's been known in its popular form in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And you had a different take on it. So I just wanted to first of all say hello and hear your response.
How you doing, Rabbi Poupko? Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I'm here to tell you that just like Mark Twain once said, the news of my death has been greatly exaggerated, and Kiruv has never been more alive. And in fact, we're about to see a revival of the 1960s and 70s in the Kiruv. You just give it another year or two, and you're going to see an explosion like you've never seen before.
But does that mean that it's dead now, or it's just going to be an extra revival? Because usually you only revive the dead.
No, it's very much alive. It's just a little different than what people are used to. So people have certain perceptions about how things are, and it's different. So it's not like it was in the old days. So I just ask people to just to change their glasses a little bit, and you'll see that very a movement full of vitality and life. It's very actually very good time to be involved in Kiruv. I invite Israel to back in.
All right. So first of all, yes, to be clear, there are many people doing great work in the field of Kiruv, whether it means working with people who are sort of on the brink of leaving Orthodoxy, or it's people who are interested in coming in, or it's just generally spreading a sense of Judaism to people who may not become Orthodox, but nonetheless, that's also very important to make sure that the Judaism is something that is a big part of everyone's life. My question to you is, first of all, do you think that we have, or what do we have more of? Are we losing more people, or are we gaining more people? Are we in the red, or are we in the black?
It's hard to say. I can only tell you what I see from my community, and a little bit I see in the modern Orthodox world as well in New Jersey, just because I work with that population a little bit in Rutgers. In Lakewood, so I many times I'll go at night. I live in Lakewood, so a lot of times I'll go at night in Elchanan, which is like a center for teens who are struggling or at risk. Let's say there's approximately 40,000 kids in Lakewood, 45,000. Off the derech youth, probably less than 1,000. You're probably talking about less than 1%. Just anecdotally.
I mean, I'm not great at math, but that's more than 1%. If you have
well, no, that is more than 1%. But if you're taking also that's K through 12th, but you're also taking kids who are till 21, 22, 23. So basically, the reason I'm saying less than 21, less than a very small amount, probably less than 1%. Isn't it? Maybe I would say less than 5% is a better number. But I asked my sons, I have 4 sons, and I asked them, how many kids go off. They said they'll say usually in a class.
One in a class of how many?
25 to 30.
Okay, so that's more than
and of those, many of them come back eventually.
Okay, and first of all, unfortunately, in the American Jewish community, it's very hard to keep statistics, just because it's such an open community. We don't live in a place where we're asking everyone what they're doing every day, so it's really harder to gauge. But in Israel, where they do take very careful statistics, the numbers do seem to be pretty high. I think the number was 3,000 people leave the Haredi community in Israel every year. It's a bigger community, but the numbers are high. And so without having any evidence of those numbers coming back in, and obviously it's different people, and everyone should be in my view in full observance if they can, if it's possible. That is definitely a goal and an ideal. The question is, though, it seems like you have we're bleeding people, as they say. There are more people leaving than there are coming in. It definitely, if you look at the statistics in Israel.
That could be. I can't speak to Israel. I mean, in the modern Orthodox world that I'm seeing, so I would say it used to be the numbers that I heard from certain modern Orthodox high schools and overall was very high. It was like, talking about kids who
What number can you say?
The number that I was hearing from different places, from Rabbi Przansky, and just anecdotally from speaking to my students at Rutgers, going back 10 years ago, was probably somewhere between 25 and 50% of a typical modern Orthodox graduating class was not going to be shown by the time college was finished. However, I think the numbers come down a bit, just again, speaking to students. And also, I don't think it's fair to consider everybody who goes to a modern Orthodox school to be Orthodox, because even though they might be part of the modern Orthodox community, a good percentage of those parents are not truly Orthodox. In other words, they may like not work on Shabbos, but they also they'll turn TV on after the meal, they phones, and so they're not. So what do you expect from their kids? So that's why it's and this is a point that I made that I wrote actually a response to your article, which is yet to be published.
Not yet.
If it ever gets there. But the point is that in the old days, we would call such people conservative Jews. In other words, because they were traditional.
But by the way, that's if I may say so, that's not true. Even and I think this is one of the big fallacies growing up in the Frum community that you get, is that back in the Alta Haim, everyone was Frum. You look at all the pictures. Not. But there were plenty of Jews in the 40s that were considered Orthodox, and or anytime before the existence of the conservative movement, there were plenty of people with different affiliations and different levels of observance who were not let's say keeping the observing Shabbos the way we consider to be sort of the golden standard, and they were considered Orthodox. I think Rabbi Sachs had a great saying. He met with former Prime Minister, now head of the opposition, Yair Lapid. And Yair Lapid said something about him being a secular Jew. And Rabbi Sachs told him, the only people who believe that Israeli secular Jews are secular are Israelis, because most Israelis are observing kosher, are observing Shabbat in some way, and it's just hard to say who's in and who's out. But no, I don't think we used to consider someone conservative because they didn't, comply with, the exact standards. That's why the Young Israel came about, by the way, because they wanted to enforce a stricter, more universal Shabbos.
So let me say it a different way. In the 60s and 70s, when the Baal Tshuva movement, quote unquote, was at its height, and everybody, everybody, in their in the glory days, and everybody sort of waxes poetic about it. Many of the people who were coming back, were people who were ostensibly, had some connection, maybe were affiliated with an Orthodox shul, but they weren't really Shomer Shabbos in a complete way, or even in a meaningful way. And so everybody's returning, and they're coming back. They're going to the yeshivas, and the yeshivas are full. Today, if the same type of kid who happens to go to a modern Orthodox high school goes and returns, everybody's like, oh, well, you can't find any Bali Tshuva, so you're trying to get them from the modern Orthodox high school. That's not an apples to apples comparison. I don't think that's fair. I think that there's a mix today, and in the past, there's a mix of people who are becoming Bali Tshuva. Them are people who grew up in Orthodox quote unquote home, but not really observant or only marginal, and some who are very secular who came back. So that's the apples to apples comparison. That's something that I want to push back on.
Definitely, a lot of these things are semantics, right? There's a big difference if someone grows up in South Africa, where there is basically no conservative and reform movement, and you always belong to an Orthodox community, no matter what your level of observance is, versus someone who grows up on the Upper West Side, where if you're slightly, if the needle moves slightly to the left, and you're doing something a little bit different, you're out of the Orthodox spectrum. So yeah, these things are hard to quantify in a scientific way, because it's just a lot of it just depends on social norms, and who are we to say that the guy in South Africa whose family goes to shul only on Yom Kippur is Orthodox, but then the guy on the Upper West Side, who they go to egalitarian minyan or whatever, is not. It's much harder to compare. You're right. But
Poupko, I would say like this: if you're talking about the Haredi community, our retention rate is better than any time any time since the 1750s. If you're talking about the non-Orthodox world, our retention rate it could do a lot better. But that the same thing would be with the Dati Leumi community in Israel. Now,
Right, so it's hard to break it up now into sub communities of the Orthodox community. But speaking of the Haredi community, is that true? Are the retention rates today higher than 20 years ago?
I don't know 20 years ago, but the retention rates in general now, as compared to 100 years ago, anywhere in Europe is vastly better. And I would challenge that if you just take the Jewish people as a whole since 1750, the retention rates, if you're just looking at the Haredi community, it's pretty high. And if you're looking at then the modern Orthodox community is a different question. I'm not trying to hate on modern Orthodox people.
Mm-hmm.
I work with modern Orthodox people; they're wonderful, but that the retention rates are a little bit less. Although again, even that seems to be getting better. Again, anecdotally, from what I could see.
Right. So a few things. So first of all, in terms of comparing Haredi to modern Orthodox, this is what you were saying before. Modern Orthodoxy can mean that the person comes from a house who's not, right. The parents are not necessarily Shomer Shabbos. The modern Orthodox tent includes people with various backgrounds, as opposed to the Haredi world.
That's why it's not a great analysis of the modern Orthodox world. Like it's too broad to come down and say, yeah, that's fair, right?
Yeah. And that's first of all. And second of all, I wouldn't like to see the terms modern Orthodox and Haredi as competing here. We're talking about the stream of Orthodoxy. We can't get into Chabad. So Orthodoxy as a whole is doing great in terms of birth rates. Are we, just to repeat the question, are we doing well with retention rates? Are there people staying? Are there fewer people leaving than 20 years ago? What are your thoughts?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know. So I just from the broad, vast scope of history, I mean, one could legitimately say that this is the best we can do, given the reality that we're in. It's been 2,000 years since we had any meaningful connection to Hashem in terms of a Beis HaMikdash. We're in the sea of Galus for this long, and what does Hashem expect? Like, we're doing the best we can. We're trying to keep our nose above water. Is the frum world perfect? Far from it. Obviously, clearly not. But all things considered, I think it's actually not bad. I think there's a lot of beauty in the frum world, and a lot of great things that we should be very proud of.
Of course,
doing as good as we can. And there's a lot of areas which you need a lot of improvement. But you know what? It's always been like that. So that's what I would say.
Right. Look, there's no question that the challenges are great and what's being accomplished is also fantastic. And your question as to can we be doing better, I think especially in the past 2 years, there's been this sense in the frum community that we're under attack and we need to defend ourselves. And if someone
it's been like that ever since I remember. People
no, but it's in the media. I don't know how old you are. In the 1990s, no one in the frum community, except for an occasional op-ed by Jonathan Rosenblum, was worried about how we're being perceived in the media. And with the eruption of social media, there is this great sense of we're under attack, and
I just think we have more. I just think now we have more ability to project our voice.
Respond.
Yeah, people felt that way back in the 1990s, but there was no Haredi media other than the Jewish Observer. But the Jewish Observer would write articles like that all the time, by the way.
Yeah. So, but with that comes, in my opinion, a price of assuming that any kind of self-criticism, any kind of attempt to improve, any kind of discussion of what's going on is sort of anywhere between just being haters, anti-Semites, just looking to discredit all the good work that's being done. And in my opinion, that's a mistake. But
a lot of that is a knee-jerk reaction of the, for lack of a better expression, the failed Messiah movement, and all of the bloggers of the early 2000s sort of. They feel under siege. Even when there's legitimate criticism, people sort of circle the wagons, even though they shouldn't.
Right, and so questions like this, who are really fundamental. So I'm gonna ask a question which I've brought up many times. So, what can we do? So, just kids getting into schools and camps. I think there's a catastrophe there. to get a kid, and this is true, Hasidish, modern Orthodox, Yeshivish, whatever it is, to get a kid into school, even the kids that do get in, is most often very difficult, and to some people impossible for often no good reason. That's not the way you behave when you feel like you need people. And so I feel like the sense that we're doing things have never been better, and we're doing great, and nothing's bad, and there's no room for any trouble, causes anyone that's on the margins to be swept under the rug. And it's actually a lot of the strongest voices that end up criticizing the frum community are the people who've been pushed aside. It's not people from. I know that there was this whole discussion about the New York Times articles about the Hasidish, certain Hasidish schools. A lot of it was driven by people from the Hasidish community, and so the question is can it be done differently? I get requests to get a kid into a summer program. Why is that in the frum community, and I was speaking to someone in a Chabad family, why is it that in the frum community, someone who grew up and did the whole, checked all the boxes, is losing sleep over getting their kid to summer camp, or getting their daughter into school in Lakewood, or getting their child into a modern Orthodox school in Manhattan?
So I can only, first of all, I'm really only want to speak about Kiruv because that's my area. So I can only really comment on that. But I happen to live in Lakewood, so I can answer your question from the Lakewood perspective. I just want to come back to one thing before I answer that, though. I don't think it's fair to say that the Haredi community thinks people think that nothing has ever been better. In fact, over the last 10 years, the whole sort of move of Haredi media, especially in places like Mishpacha magazine and Ami, is intense self-reflection to get into all the sort of air the dirty laundry in a healthy way. In fact, Mishpacha kind of goes overboard with that. So I would challenge that people think everything is perfect. In fact, you listen to if you watch any Haggadah convention or anything like that, quite the contrary. In fact, when they started this WhatsApp group called status called MKY, the whole purpose was that all we see in Haredi media today is negativity and complaining how imperfect everything is. They wanted to highlight some of the beautiful things as well. In fact, so I think that your point was fair probably about 15 years ago. The needle pushed extremely the other way, where there's hyper self-reflection in the Haredi community. Now people are saying, well, it's probably not quite as bad as people are portraying. Well, let's go somewhere in the middle. That's
you know, that you remind me of the joke about the guy that didn't get an aliyah on Yom Kippur, and he started screaming and saying it's a disgrace. I donate so much to this shul. I do so much good for the community. How dare you not give me an aliyah? And he throws a whole tantrum in shul on Yom Kippur. And they say to him, you just stood a few minutes ago. You said, Ashamnu, Bagadnu. You made horrible confessions about yourself. You spoke of your humility. And here you are throwing this tantrum. He says, it's true. Before God, I'm imperfect. But compared to everyone else, I'm doing better than anyone. So I think some of those, the point you're making is yes, there's more self-reflection in fields like addiction, different family life challenges. But in terms of the structure of the community, are we doing things right in terms of how we interact with people, how we're handling our schools? I think in that there is a sense that as long as it's any criticism that's coming from the outside is a form of anti-Semitism and hate and who knows what. I definitely have encountered it myself. This sort of you must be an anti-Semite because you're not a fan of the schools in Lakewood or something, and I'm not the only one. Look, the criticism doesn't have to only be reflection is not only internal. It's so let me get back to schools because it's a dear thing to me. You work in Kiruv. I'm going to sew the two together. Yeah. Sure. Is your goal at any point in the Kiruv that you do to have people that you're reaching out, literally Kiruv, you're bringing them closer, move to the community you're living in?
In Lakewood, no, I don't think that Lakewood's a good community for Bali Shuvah.
So that is not
strongly dissuade. I would try to get them to if they wanted to move to a religious community, encourage them to go to Highland Park Edison, which is ideal.
And you don't see a problem in that?
No, because first of all, Lakewood Lakewood is a beautiful community in a lot of ways, but it has certain problems. So let's take the school problem that you just raised, right? So there's a problem. The math problem is that you have 40,000 kids in schools. You need to have probably, I don't know, you need to have probably 100, 150 schools to handle that kind of volume in any way, or really 200. So right now, there's simply not enough spaces in girls' schools for people to get where they need to go. So, for example, in two of the girls' schools that I know of, right, they have 45 kids in a class, which is insane. That's not chinuch, right? So you just have a numbers problem. So at a certain point, there's just an issue of just how many more people could we shoehorn physically into place. So what we need really is people to step up and to build more schools and take responsibility to do that. It's very, very hard to do it. There's a very, very big skill in how to do it in an effective way. So in Lakewood, it's really about math. Does everybody act on the up and act properly? Clearly not. And I know that because I spent a lot of time fighting for a certain girl to get into high school. And I know the perception of some principals of the smaller schools versus some of the other principals. So nobody thinks that the situation is ideal. Certainly it's not. In general, as to the other point, why I think Bali Tshuva should move to Lakewood. It's a very big place, and it's a certain personality, and you're not gonna. It's very hard to find your place and find your niche and feel like a someone in a place like Edison or Highland Park. It's much more small. It's more personal. You can find set up for people who are Bali Tshuva. Lakewood's not set up for that. You're coming in with a group, and so therefore it's not an ideal place for Bali Tshuva.
But just conceptually speaking, a kiruv literally means I think that I am I'm living a life that's worthy, and I would like to bring you closer to what I'm doing. So is that the line that you would say? Would you say the life I'm leading, the society I'm living in, that is something worthy, and I want to share that with you? Is that the approach, or is it I want to sign you up to the closest modern Orthodox school?
My job is to inspire each person to maximize their spiritual potential. So that whatever that person, however, in whatever way that person is going to grow, that's what I want them to do. If it means that person is going to be a Jewish person, great. If it means that they won't marry Jewish, but they'll have some idea of what being Judaism is, great. If it means they'll put on tefillin every day, great. If it means they'll end up being Shomer Shabbos, great.
But should it mean that they come live in not Lakewood but the Tom's River? Right? Meaning, is that something that you wish on them? Do you think it's going to be good?
It's great. I have students who end up in Livingston and go to suburban Torah. I have students. Most of my students end up in Highland Park. Some are modern Orthodox. Some relate to the yeshiva world. I have students to go wherever they feel that's their calling and they feel closest to.
My question is the Haredi or even modern Orthodox? I'll just tell you a story I encounter often. You have a child who's just a bit out of the line in whatever community, in Lubavitch, in Haimish, in modern Orthodoxy, and they're different, and the schools easily just turn a kid away. What's the kid gonna do? I have no idea. That's not a behavior that shows that we are trying to grow as a community. That's not the behavior that where every school is looking to expand. And so the question is, are we even trying to expand, or are we always just trying to do Kiruv but go to my neighbor's shul?
Right. So that's a structural question that needs to be addressed. It's a fair question. But I think there's the example that you're talking about now is a phenomenon of where many of the schools, in order for them to be successful, they have to be run by private individuals as private businesses, and they're the most effective people in order in terms of running and building a school. The problem is that those people as private individuals feel no sense of achrayus, very often do not feel a sense of achrayus to the greater community, and then such kids get swallowed up in the process because they get caught, in sort of no man's land. And so in every community, you have to have community schools that will have a sense of achrayus for each person in the community. The problem is, in a place like Lakewood, community schools never work. They always falling out because everybody says, yeah, let the community school be for somebody else, not for me.
But this is not just in Lakewood. This is also in Manhattan. You do have a situation where people want to be part of the Orthodox community. And so a difficult question we have to have is, are we even looking for Kiruv? Are we even looking to grow? Or is the field so crowded already that we just don't want more people? And we want people to not join. And there are the birth rates are high enough that we don't need to draw people from the outside.
That's not. I'm sorry. I wouldn't look at it that way. I look at it as, what does Hashem want? Hashem wants each
So
Jew.
you tell me. So if Hashem wants every Jew to come closer to Judaism, why can't we fit them into our schools and summer camps?
We have to do a better job directing them to places where they'll be more successful. And Lakewood's not a place. Now, some.
No, I'm not talking. I'm talking about. I'm talking about really any part of Orthodoxy.
So look, first of all, not every person, many people in the Orthodox world are not Kiruv minded, so I can't speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to stop doing Kiruv because someone else is not. My job is to do what Hashem wants. Hashem clearly does want. It's part of the mitzvah Avos Hashem and many other mitzvahs. I can't help it if not everybody's Kiruv friendly. I can only do the job that we could do. We try, and the best we could do is to direct these, these wonderful Bali Tshuva to communities in which they have the best.
Somewhere else.
To some place, to Highland Park or Edison or Passaic or.
But the issue then is, and I'll be very blunt, the issue is that then the big modern Orthodox schools in New Jersey will say, okay, send them to New York, and the ones in New York send them to I don't know where, Connecticut. There has to be a behavior that shows we want more people. We're open for business, and if we don't have that attitude, people are not coming in.
So maybe that's because the schools and the Kiruv organizations aren't aligned.
But this is a fundamental issue, because when you go out there and you do Kiruv, you're selling a certain product and a community, and if that community does not have the ability to absorb, then it just where are you bringing them to is my question.
Okay, so that's a fair question, and I think that there's some developments which you'll find to be very happy. You'll be happy. I hope. Okay, the developments is that there's a number of burgeoning communities for Bali Tshuva in Edison, in Borough Park of all places.
Oh wow,
Eisenberger, which is a chiddush.
Where is this?
In Borough Park, or Benjamin Eisenberger
has big news. Yeah, is the hipsters, the Brooklyn Heights hipsters?
No, wow. And, Rage is doing a lot with their community. You have in Philadelphia, there's a Chabura for Bali Tshuva. In Los Angeles, under Rabbi Quinn, Rabbi Bloom. In Passaic, under Liz Winter, in the Women's House. In Olami houses, there's wonderful Olami houses sprouting up all over the places. So a lot of people go to Woodmere in the 5 towns. There's the shower. The shower is unbelievable. The shower is a program for students and young professionals, and they're creating for them in Far Rockaway. It's happening all over the place. It's never happened before. There's you should go to Muncie. You should go to Taurus David from Yosef Simon. He created an entire community, 100 and just for the Bali Tshuva. And the people who help him the most are the FFBs in Muncie.
Let me ask a very specific question. And this is again partially because of the Israeli in me. The largest.
Where in Israel are you from, if you don't mind me asking?
Har Nof, where there were, we grew up. My father was teaching in I think Bravenders. My mom was teaching in Chappelle's at the time. So I grew up in this world where really we saw it all over, and hence my impression that it's not what it used to be. The question is, the largest non-American demographic at this point in America is not Russian Jews, it is Israelis. What's being done in terms of reaching out to Israelis who, according to many unofficial reports, tend to leave or disaffiliate or just are not, they don't have the same need that we have just as American Jews to affiliate with a synagogue or a day school. What's being done in terms of outreach to Israelis?
So if they're in a regular campus community, they're trying to be reached out to by the local Makarev. As much as anybody else, nothing specific to Israelis. Chabad is very active with Israelis all over the country. I once, many years ago, I went to Chabad in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and they had a whole community. It was the most beautiful thing in the world. You see them learning between Mincha. It was so beautiful. And you have in Florida, there's a massive Chabad presence over there, and in each place there's different rabbis, Kiruv, Chabad, whichever one. They're trying to reach them as much as possible. I mean, obviously we're not doing enough,
right?
But so that's
there's a very difficult and painful question that sort of just hits me now as we speak. Is it possible that if we take what you're saying, that the Kiruv movement is alive and well, and add it to the fact that these communities are sprouting as independent communities that were sort of creating these segregated or separate or meaning
they're not independent. They're not independent. They're independent in the sense that they're let's say the Edison Chabura has like a dorm for guys coming back from yeshiva in Israel, but he's setting them up, for Shabbos meals with just any type
no,
of
but
phone.
in our communities, why is it not that 10% of every community, no matter where you go, is Baal Tshuva?
First of all, it may well be that they are.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, out of town, probably it's much more than 10%.
Mm-hmm.
There's hundreds and hundreds of Bali Tshuva, and if you go back to people who became Bali Tshuva in the 60s and 70s,
well, that's the point.
You could find a lot more than that, but
right.
But now they just don't look like Bali Tshuva. They sort of
mix in better.
Yeah, because because they're 3 generations in. Their grandchildren. I have my son's yeshiva, Rabbi Gray's yeshiva in Lake. He has a friend whose grandmother was a hippie, but you would never know anything. So
but you don't have anyone whose mom was a hippie or not a hippie, just not from.
Sure. He has a guy actually whose dad was played soccer in the Israeli league. Sure. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's not so uncommon. I mean,
got it.
There's hundreds of Bali Tshuva in Lakewood. I wouldn't say
so,
I don't know. Yeah.
Probably. I'll just go to another point I addressed, and that is the yeshivas. Because I actually had the zchus of knowing Rabbi Noach Weinberg. I spent some time with him, and a lot of the Bali Tshuva yeshivas, which were built with a great deal of effort, whether it's Eish Torah or Sameach Shar Yashuv, do seem to be opening more and more programs for FFBs, for people who grew up from. If indeed there are Bali Tshuva coming in, why can't we fill what was full 40 years ago?
There was a bit of a dip in Eish and or Sameach a number of years ago, and they were also getting many people from the non-Orthodox community who had many of the big Baal Tshuva type of questions. So that's why they opened up these programs. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that both our Sameach and Eish Torah are overflowing primarily with Baal Tshuva. In fact, had to bring in bunk beds because their dorm simply did not suffice anymore. Wow. And they told me that they had to rent out space from locals because there was no more room in the dorm. And they rejected. Rabbi Menachem Deutsch was telling me how many people they had to reject from coming in because there simply was no space.
So Torah, they too are rejecting. I mean, that's like
because again, there's no space. Yeah. If you have an apartment for them to put them, they'll be happy to do it. But again, you can't expect people to take people in if there's physically no space for them.
There's no space. Mm-hmm.
Right. The same thing with Eish Torah. Eish Torah had to send people away because they had a South American program which had to actually find a new home.
Wow.
The program was so expansive, and that's not just from the Eish Gesher, non-Orthodox program. Mm-hmm. That's programs which came in. And I think this is largely a phenomenon of COVID, is that since COVID, we're seeing a very, very big renewal of people interested in Judaism, the emptiness of the world, and I think also pragmatically, there's programs like internship which have changed the game, giving people job opportunities, and also they give them job opportunities along with learning atmosphere.
Wow,
the yeshivas are growing so big.
All right, Rabbi Meir Goldberg, really doing great work, and not only bringing good news from now, but God willing, in a year or two from now, we're going to see things even grow more. And it's not a simple thing, especially today with the raging anti-Semitism on campus. I'm sure your presence there means to people more than just, a Torah class. But it's not so bad, the anti-Semitism on campus.
No, it's actually, I hate to say this, but sometimes anti-Semitism is good, because the worst thing that we have on campus is apathy. So sometimes when there's a little anti-Semitism to stir the pot,
people wake up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm sure that
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, I was just gonna thank you really and say how I'm sure your presence there really helps Jewish students find their place.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate this vibrant and animated conversation, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much, and keep up the good work.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.